Selling Known Failure Modes as Innovation in Online Hiring, a legal economic framework for the coming reckoning. Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull. I am the founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective, the first anonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. Unlike Yelp and a world of professionally mandated fine dining, no health department and no FDA, where the restaurants very openly admit that they've been serving empty plates to customers, since at least 2012 or 13 is when the Wall Street Journal started reporting on phantom jobs in the market. Yeah. Anyway, I'm driving a paradigm shift, and that requires me to explore that in a variety of ways. This comes from written posts on my Substack, but also I make video and audio blogs of this. Please follow along if you're interested in legal and economic frameworks for the coming reckoning, class action lawsuits. The paradigm shift is rising. And I need to help job seekers understand other ways outside of using my platform to stay safe in the market, how they can recover some of the economic value that was stripped from them over the last 25 years in different ways. It's a global market, so I have readers and listeners outside the U.S. This would apply to you as well. I will start from the beginning and see what you think. $500 billion a year. That's what the online industry, hiring industry, collects to stand between every job seeker and every employer in the modern economy. This series is about what they did with that position and what it's going to cost them. Its series is not a prediction, it's an accounting. For 2 decades, the online hiring market has confused filtering for matching. Yikes. Profiting from exclusion in a survival market. Yikes. Obfuscation for innovation and volume for value. It is done so proudly, loudly, and in writing. Their own writing. The goal here is simple: to use each company's own marketing and basic arithmetic to show what they sold and what they delivered and what the gap is likely worth in the courtrooms of the future. Who this is for: job seekers seeking to understand how to hold the HR tech industry and staffing and recruiting. My numbers come from both. For systemic failure in a survival market. By the way, I'll put links on check the research section so you can see where I pull some of my numbers from. Small business employers who have struggled to hire and in some cases failed under the weight of application noise, particularly in care sectors. Municipalities seeking to understand their role in protecting citizens and recovering eroded tax base and public system strain. Economists and public policy specialists examining where regulation is long overdue and how much economic and structural harm it has caused. Genuinely, like for the healthcare industry, you have multiple regulatory bodies. For the restaurant industry, it's the same. Food, healthcare has multiple. You have one industry that controls access to food, healthcare, and housing. And there's no regulation and no reputation, aka the online hiring industry. They're the gatekeeper for all of those, and it exists outside of reputation regulation. It's a huge error. To start the reputation, but part of this is always sparking legal and public policy people to do more with regulation, too. Legal specialists evaluating how the class actions may be constructed based on the unilateral governance of these platforms. So here's the thing. Before the market went online, it wasn't unilaterally governed. It wasn't a monarchy. It was only when the market moved online that the silence of job seekers got extended to the entire market itself. It used to be job seekers talked to newspapers all the time. They stopped being able to. Suddenly, the market had only one governor. It was employers. And it had dropped out the feedback from well over 95% of the participants. It was always going to. This is not possible other way. When one side of a two-sided market holds all the governance power, the platform loses the structural ability to facilitate a neutral match. Not possible. In this environment, the platform can produce a connection. I agree. It can produce a connection, but it cannot reliably sell one. Not possible. You cannot build a bridge when there's only one side. Does not exist. It's just a simulation. It's just protection of a protected identity. The only product it can consistently deliver and monetize is identity, because it's all it has. It doesn't have, this is not a facilitating connection market. It's a conforming to the appropriate identity market. The structured differentiation and ranking, the only product it can consistently deliver and monetize is identity. The structured differentiation and ranking of the participants. This series identifies the legal and economic gap between the match they promised and the identity they actually sold. The method is not an opinion piece, it's an inquiry. The series examines the online hiring industry company by company using their own public record, including marketing materials, feature descriptions, investor language, and basic arithmetic to measure the gap between what they sold and what they delivered. I'll just pull screenshots. They put it on, There are no external standards imposed here. I don't make any economic rules. I just apply the normal ones. I use only standard academic frameworks to analyze this market genuinely. Nothing is innovative. It's really straightforward. The method is simple. Take them at their word and do the math. What did they say they would do? Is that even possible? The piece establishes the framework. It defines the failure modes that reoccur across the category, identifies 3 groups who bear the costs, and outlines the legal economic case for why the industry's exposure is not speculative. It's a function of scale, documentation, and time. That's it. Each company will be examined in its own installment. The method will not vary. Their claims, their product design, and their public statements, measured against the requirements of a functioning 2-sided market. Receipts are already public. The series will read them out loud. What they claim to be. Every one of these companies made the same claim. Some in Super Bowl ads and billboards, others in product fine print. We connect job seekers with employers. We make the match. There's a term for what these companies built, a 2-sided market. One side pays, the other side receives access. Could be goods, services, whatever it is. They receive access. That position is not neutral for the vendors. It comes with obligation to both sides. These companies collected the fees, they skipped those obligations. Consider a simple analogy. A restaurant serves the people who walk in the door. It takes their money in exchange for a meal. No law is required to enforce this. The obligation is embedded in the act of calling yourself a restaurant. The standard of service is implied by the claim. The online hiring industry made the same kind of claim. Taken seriously, it implies at a minimum functional UX for both job seekers and employers, accessible support, and clear documentation. A core function of matching, not profiting from exclusion from matching. Filtering. Transparency about what the product the user is actually engaging with. These are not sophisticated demands. They are what we connect job seekers with employers actually means. The installments that follow will measure that claim against each platform or vendor's own materials and basic arithmetic. The gap is not isolated. It is patterned across the category. 5 ways to measure a purpose. The 5 failure modes outlined here represent the low-hanging fruit, as far as I could tell, of the industry's accountability. They are the most visible, most documented, and most easily measured gaps between what was sold and what was delivered. They provide a standardized way to begin the accounting. However, they are not exhaustive. They are the entry point. As we go company by company, these categories will provide the baseline, but specific evidence found in the public records will inevitably spark deeper inquiries into how these platforms have reshaped our economy and our society. We are setting the foundation. We expect the legal and economic community to bring the rest of the tools. Yeah, it's reasonable. People are going to have other training and other insights that I don't, and that's how it should be. That's how you get people who are really good at gymnastics and really good at other people who are really good at basketball. And Simone Biles can cheer on Shaq, and Shaq can cheer on Simone Biles, because you don't got to be good at everything. You just got to try to be really good at a particular thing if you can. Try to succeed in this thing. So I focus on the foundation. First foundational problem, white labeling and obfuscation. When a job seeker clicks on a job ad or what appears to be an employer's careers page, they often have no reliable way of knowing what they're engaging with. The platform they're interacting with may be white labeled. The role may be scraped. The entity collecting their data may bear no resemblance to the employer they believe they're approaching. Genuinely, should check out Jay Jones's work on LinkedIn. He's taken on like 30,000 fake recruiters They just copy real recruiter profiles on LinkedIn and make another page and, send people to get their identity scraped. It's not cool. But anyway, here. No, yes. So this is not a user experience flaw. It is information asymmetry. In a marketplace is information asymmetry. One party systematically knows more than the other and benefits from it. The vendor benefits from the confusion. A hiring market degrades in direct proportion to the informed choices its participants cannot make. Remember, job seekers are well over 95% of the users. A hiring market degrades in direct proportion to the informed choices its participants cannot make. Well, when you can confuse well over 95% of your users, your engagement doesn't degrade. Just your outcome does. Yeah. Engagement increases the more you're allowed to confuse the users. And when your profits are based on engagement, and good actors are buried alongside the bad ones. Obfuscation does not just hide poor behavior, it makes quality invisible. Truth. George Akerlof wrote pretty well about this sort of thing. It was quite good. Number 2, absence of support and accountability. In a functioning marketplace, FAQ pages, support infrastructure, and documentation are not amenities. They are basic mechanisms, accountability mechanisms. Genuinely, the newspaper had all these things. They only got ripped out when hiring went online because it stopped being a bilateral governance thing and started being a unilateral governance, Here, they're often absent, inadequate, or difficult to find. Yeah. The asymmetry compounds. The job seeker does not know they're on a vendor platform, so they do not know they can ask for help. They do not know what to ask or who to ask or that recourse exists at all. The vendor is insulated by the confusion it created and profits more from the engagement related to that confusion. The job seeker and thus strained local municipalities absorb direct costs. Good acting employers and small businesses struggling to pay more and receive direct impact of the angst in their local workforce. Again, George Akerlof wrote about information asymmetry. It's the same kind of thing. Now, number 3, the user experience that must not be named. I was referencing Voldemort, but job seekers occupy a peculiar position in this market. They exist when the platform needs volume. They disappear when the platform needs to account for outcomes. They exist when the platform needs volume. They disappear when the platform needs to account for outcomes. They function like a magic pea in a shell game or Schrodinger's stakeholder of a job market participant, responsible for why the paying customer should play again, but also why the investment never results in an outcome. It's quite a double bind. Very profitable one, I'm sure. Well, I'm saying we didn't demonstrate. This is not a bad app user experience, because this is not buying shoes. This is a survival market. Employment is the access point for income, housing, healthcare, and stability. The participants on this side of the market, they are not browsing for fun. Job seekers represent half the market's stakeholders, but the overwhelming majority of its participants. The absence of user experience accountability for that population is not accidental. It is diagnostic, and its consequences are not abstract. They are measurable economic extraction at scale. If job seekers were a stakeholder in this two-sided market, their experience would be visible and measured. Vendors would surface the user experience performance because it would affect their ability to win and retain paying customers. It's just basic. That's what being a stakeholder is. How else do you choose which vendor? Based on which stakeholders, like what the user reviews as stakeholders. If job seekers were a product in this market, if their labor was if it was a product, the labor was a product being sold, their experience would also be measured. How else do you improve the efficient delivery of the product to the customer? They're selling efficiency, but they never measure the lines. My husband worked in manufacturing. You always watch the lines, check to make sure where it's getting kinked up because you want it to go smoother. The lack of user experience means they're not trying to deliver efficiency, or else it would exist. There is no meaningful, visible UX accountability for job seekers across this category. That means job seekers are neither the customer nor the product being sold. Their labor is in the product being sold, or else you would maximize efficiency. They don't. They are required for the system to function, but unrecognized by it. Their presence generates value for employers, value the employers are paying to access. They receive nothing in return, no compensation, no transparency, and no recourse. Their presence has created trillions in value for vendors. And whatever the employers thought they were paying access to, their presence was required for it. So employers got value from it. The platforms got value from it. But we know job seekers weren't a stakeholder and they weren't a customer. They weren't a product. This is not an oversight. This is the business model. And it raises a question the next installments will return to. An employer purchasing access to an efficient hiring process would demand visibility into that experience. That visibility was never requested. That absence has its own implications about what employers paid for. Knowingly, and again, it's not whether or not they intended to pay for it, it's that they never stopped to ask a question while requiring the workforce to participate, nonetheless. Intent is not required for impact, only negligence will do, So after job seekers sue the vendors to the ends of the earth for this, employers are definitely going to be in the mix. Who funded these things, They're the ones that said they're the paying customers that are in charge. Oh, then you're in charge, aren't you? If the parents are aware that Disney World has broken rides, that the kids don't like Disney World, and they keep buying tickets, it's not really Disney World's problem. Patronage is permission. It's not really the kids' problem. They didn't have a choice. I'm just saying. 4, filtering instead of matching. What the ATS platforms sell is not matching. They're profiting from filtering. The product as designed, marketed, and deployed is volume reduction. They tell you top 5%. That's what they say. That's not matching. That's profiting from exclusion. Platform optimized for matching would measure match quality. True. Whether the right candidate reached the right role, whether the hire worked, whether both sides were served. None of the major platforms in this category publish those metrics. What they publish instead is throughput, applications processed, resume screen, time to hire, time to filter reduced. They don't sell matching. They don't measure it. They don't sell efficiency either. If job seekers were products moving through a delivery system, basic operations logic dictates that you watch the belt. You measure where things slow down, where drop-offs occur, where the process stalls, not to improve the product, to improve the throughput. Every competent operation does this. The belt here is unwatched. No major platform in this category publishes or optimizes for job seeker experience metrics. The friction points are not being instrumented, which means the platform is not running a delivery operation. They don't sell efficiency. They do not behave that way. That's not how you sell efficiency ever. In reality, there's no version of efficiency selling that operates that way ever. What they do sell, they advertise openly. Top 5% of candidates. Not the right candidate, not the best match. 5%. That is cutting function, not connecting function. Not the right candidate, not the best match. Top 5%. That is cutting function. That is not connecting function. The value proposition stated plainly in their own marketing is the removal of 95% of applicants from consideration. The obstruction is the product Everything else, the silence, the missing user experience, the absent metrics, follows from that. It is not a series of failures. It is a single coherent business model expressed consistently across design, marketing, and pricing. The mechanism this creates is well understood in economic literature. In a two-sided market, exclusion logic, filtering logic, does not produce equilibrium. It produces escalation every time. Nash's non-converging equilibrium thing. Job seekers receive no signal, apply to more roles. Employers receive more volume, purchase more aggressive filtering. Filtering generates more silence, which generates more applications. At no point does this cycle match quality improve. At no point in this cycle does match quality improve. At no point in this cycle does efficiency improve. At every point, the platform collects fees. John Nash described it famously 75 years ago. What is being monetized is the friction, not the connection. The market is being charged for its own dysfunction, and they're paying. They're paying. The downstream cost of this cycle, time, income, operational burden, municipal tax space erosion, are absorbed by parties who had no seat at the table where the product was designed. The employer who contracted for the service bears responsibility for the conditions that contract imposes on the other side of the market. The vendor who designed those conditions bears responsibility for understanding what they built. It doesn't matter if you didn't mean for the bridge to break. If you designed a bridge upside down and sold it that way, and you purchased it that way, that's a choice. These are not novel harms. These mechanisms are documented, taught, in some cases, named after economists who identified them a century ago. The platforms that deployed them were not operating in ignorance. They were operating in profit. The friction is not a bug. It's the margin. It's the rent seeking. One-click apply in the noise cycle. One-click apply is marketed as efficiency. In practice, it creates noise. Its counterpart, AI filtering, is sold as a solution to the noise it helps create. These aren't increasing efficiency. They're increasing employers' tolerance for engagement by offloading responsibility onto the party they were already going to blame. No? The result is a feedback loop. A one-click apply I'm talking about. More applications needs more filtering, creates more applications. Same as I said before. At no point does match quality improve. Functionally, this is a Jevons paradigm, Jevons, a William Jevons, talking about increased efficiency of access to something, like increased efficiency of access to talk to employers, would increase your use of it. Behaviorally, but in the modern era, I think this is what you're looking at here. It's a distributed denial of surface attack against the hiring infrastructure. The same dynamic where a system gets flooded with requests until it stops functioning, except here the flood is funded by the employers whose system it breaks. The vendors collect fees on both ends. The downstream costs are absorbed by job seekers, small businesses, and municipalities who were never represented in this system's design. The failures do not operate independently. They form a sequence: disorientation, abandonment, extraction, breakdown, amplification. Each stage makes the next worse, and the costs do not disappear. It lands on the people and institutions who reasonably expected this industry or the experts of it to do what it claimed. It did not. Who paid the price? Three groups bear the cost most directly. And again, I'm aware that in a marketplace like this at the foundation, there are a lot of people with downstream impacts. I'm just starting on the foundation, building the foundation here. Job seekers lost time and signal navigating a system that processed them rather than evaluate them, while representing itself as a meritocracy. The downstream consequences of structurally delayed access to employment are not abstract. Financial instability, housing precarity, and measurable psychological harm at scale. I would be truly surprised if the vast majority of the job-seeking population isn't running with PTSD. Most of the U.S. said this one. These are not edge cases. They are the predictable, foreseeable outputs of a system designed in the receipts they proudly published to profit from that delay. These are not edge cases. They are the predictable, foreseeable outputs of a system designed in the receipts it proudly published to profit from the delay in a survival market. Small businesses without dedicated HR infrastructure paid for signal and received noise. They absorbed the operational costs, unnecessary interviews, prolonged searches, unfilled roles. They couldn't raise wages because they could barely stay seen. In sectors already running on thin margins, that cost is not theoretical. It shows up in stagnating wages, inability to retain staff, and hiring processes that quietly fail when the platform collects its fee, while the platform collects its fee. Free job posting areas aren't good because Michigan, like the local state stuff, it's always full of junk data. Nobody trusts the market. This is what happens when the leaders of capitalism genuinely think it's totally okay that nobody will trust the markets they create. Municipalities and their economic institutions, workforce boards, chambers of commerce, economic development office sit in different position than the other two harm parties. The harmers arrived regardless of their choices, suppress workforce participation, reduce the tax base, increase demand on social services. They absorbed the cost of a market dysfunction they were structurally unequipped to prevent. 3 harm parties, 3 sets of costs, 3 potential bases for liability. All foreseeable, all documented in the industry's own materials publicly. My focus remains on the center of impact with this market, and though I honor that harm from market distortion and systemic negligence like this will include many downstream actors. No whistleblower is needed. The case does not rely on leaks. It relies on the public record, the press releases, the terms of service, the investor decks. These companies were proud of their work. They said so loudly in writing. Apply in one click. A 106-year-old known economic failure mode was marketed as a gift to job seekers. Frictionless, fast, democratic. Vendors then sold the filtering tools required to manage the flood it created. The job seeker is the instrument of the one-click apply, not its beneficiary. Top 5% of candidates follows the same pattern. The language promises precision. The product delivers automated exclusion with no disclosure, no criteria, no appeal. The vendor has been paid. Responsibility has been offloaded. The receipts are already public. The series will simply read them out loud. The architecture of liability. The legal economic case against the online hiring industry does not require imagination. It requires observation. Let's say 3 classes of harm parties, 3 sets of measurable documented costs, a consistent pattern of failure modes across this entire industry. This is the basic architecture of liability. Identifiable harm, identifiable cause, identifiable defendants who designed it, marketed, and profited from it. The most likely vehicle for accountability is class action. The harm here is not concentrated. It is distributed across millions of job seekers, thousands of small businesses, and hundreds of municipalities, none of whom individually sustain damages sufficient to justify sole litigation, but all of whom collectively represent harm of considerable scale. Yeah. Class actions exist for exactly this configuration. Widespread structural injury produced by a common defendant where aggregation is the only economically viable path to accountability. Yeah, I mean, Workday is definitely only at the beginning of their troubles and most of the industry. The defense of unforeseeable harm will not survive contact with the defendant's own public archives. These failure modes are not buried in internal documents. They're features announced, marketed, and celebrated. The mechanisms involved are not obscure. They're taught in introductory economics courses and named after researchers identified them decades ago. The press releases will serve as evidence were written by corporate communications teams, approved by leadership, and published for the world to read, just including basic economics using that the people with MBAs already would have had. Litigation is at this scale is not a prediction. It's a conclusion the evidence supports. It's a global industry. Even if it doesn't start as strong in the U.S. outside of Workday and April, it just will. The harm parties are real. The harm is measurable, and the documentation already exists. The only remaining variable is timing. The installments that follow will begin the math. Check the research. The industry being examined here employs people who learn these in school. Often in 100-level courses of the MBA credentialing, they proudly list. Akerlof, the market for lemons. Yeah. Take away the industry ignored. Information asymmetry destroys markets. White labeling and obfuscation. Classic lemon logic. He won the Nobel Prize for that in 2001. Interesting. Richer and Giroux, platform competition in two-sided markets. Take away the industry ignored. Platforms mediating two groups owe obligations to both. Ignoring one side doesn't just hurt them, it breaks the market. Nash, non-corporative games, annals of mathematics. Take away the industry ignored. Independent rational actors can produce collective chaos. Filtering cycles, that's all that is. Filtering and a matching market. What are we talking about here? Coordination market. Fascinating how all the economic first principles started getting ignored, like when hiring moved online, and the market started like collapsing after that. It's wild. A civic instability in a market that controls survival. Super weird, you know? Jevons, W.S. William Jevons. The coal question from Macmillan in 1865. Take away the industry ignored. Reducing friction increases total usage, not efficiency. Reducing friction increases total usage, not efficiency. One click apply. Yikes. One click apply is a modern coal paradox. Introduction to the job applicant perspective. The job applicant perspective begins with one simple truth. The online hiring is broken at its core, structurally, not on the surface. Yeah. The market is running without the one thing that makes markets self-correct. Consequences for bad transactions. No discipline. Yeah. We are putting the feedback mechanism back. Not as a feature, not as a nice to have, as the foundation. We like good markets, you know? Markets without accountability eventually demand accountability without permission. I mean, yeah. Markets without accountability eventually demand accountability without permission. This is not a threat. It is a description of how reality works and actual economics works. The labor market is the farmer's field. It's how people eat. It's a survival market. This market requires permission, accountability without permission. There's a lot of incentive for it. We're not waiting for the industry to acknowledge the error and to form a committee around considering changes. We don't seek approval from powerful actors whose lack of basic due diligence and professionalism fund in stochastic economic and psychological harm at this scale. The standard is being built into the infrastructure directly for the job-seeking workforce, the small businesses, and the communities that absorb the cost of a market that profited via being entitled to their energy, but never required to serve them. Building a basic trust infrastructure into a two-sided survival market of billions is not revolutionary. It's repair. What comes next? The series provides a topographical map of the industry's failure. It identifies the major landmarks and the primary fault lines. I expect and encourage others to zoom in. Where I identify a filtering problem, a data scientist may find an algorithmic bias crisis. Where I identify a municipal strain, a public policy specialist may find a specific collapse in local commerce. The map is the beginning of the journey, not the end. Each installment will use the company's own words for their own product descriptions, their own public statements, and basic arithmetic to measure the distance between what they claimed and what they delivered. That is the method. It will not vary. What will vary is the name at the top of the page because there are many names. And the structure of the harm described in this piece applies in some configuration to most of them. Like they unapologetically all did it openly. Subscribe if you want to follow the accounting. Send the companies you think deserve scrutiny. Analysis is open to the public record, which means it's open to anyone willing to read carefully and do the arithmetic. Just take the same 5 failure modes and just apply it through. Look what they say. Sure, I know they said efficiency. Do they have job seeker UX publicized or no? It's not efficiency then. Do they have job seeker UX publicized? Job seekers aren't stakeholders. Okay, we're already in a weird space, you know, that sort of thing. Subscribe if you want. If you work in this industry, have been harmed by it, or employ people and recognize the dysfunction, subscribe. And if there's a company you believe belongs in the series, send it. A list of candidates is not short, and the math is not complicated. Never was. Yeah. So, that's it. That's part of the beginning of the series. I'm going to start next time. I think I'm going to start with Taleo because one of the older ATS companies. It's pretty straightforward. But, you know, us go one by one, company by company, and just describe them publicly against basic economics, see what happens, you know? And just because I say some things part of what I do is falsifiable data. you should check it against your own thoughts there. You're into your own read. See what you think. And yeah, I think I'll be able to, if you like data, it's going to be fun. Anyway, have a good one and stay sane out there and good luck to everyone. And agency, sovereignty, it's really a great thing. You're going to love it. Like once you break yourself out of the frame lock, this market, it's so easy to see once you're outside of it. It's like, just explains and predicts. The same pattern explains and predicts. It's like, that's a bummer. But it allows you to move around a lot easier because you're not trying to make comfortable people who don't deserve their frame isn't something you respect anymore. I don't know, you used to ground your reality in your own experience. But again, falsifiable data, you really shouldn't just trust any Yahoo saying things. You should check it out for yourself and see what you think. So stay sane, be kind, and be safe. Cheers.